Hello everybody, and welcome to another One Piece video. The 2-week intermission of chapters that we got this time around have all been about, well, Hashinosu and Marines. And because of that, I kind of want to venture into the untapped top-tier power that I'm sure that the Marines will have access to by the end of the series that will play a major role in the final battle of One Piece. This time the color spread is very clearly an advertisement for the live-action Netflix series. I'm pretty sure that the actual name is Tomorrow Studios and not Tomorrow Studio, but whatever. Oda's art style has definitely evolved over the years, so it's kind of cool to have him draw the original East Blue group, because this kind of means that if Oda was starting the manga right now, this is how he would draw the characters. So if we go back to the very first chapters of One Piece, you kind of notice a pretty intense difference in terms of how he started drawing them and how he draws the characters now. And the consensus is that Axe Hand Morgan is the guy behind Sanji, because you could actually catch a glimpse of his lower metallic jaw if you look closely. We also see Blue Hockey Master Arlong in the back. Also, Koby being part of the background kind of stresses the point that Koby has been on Oda's mind since the very beginning of the story, meaning that he always intended him to have a pretty important role. And from the very beginning, from the opening scene, the chapter is very clearly throwing a theme in the reader's face, and it kind of concludes with the same theme as well, which is the theme of sacrifice. More specifically, the sacrifice of the old generation in favor of the value of the new. And to go along with the color spread, we also recently got a new One Piece live action trailer, and I thought this one featured shots that were a lot more visually interesting than the first one. It's also better cut and edited. I think the music kind of gives it a Pirates of the Caribbean feel. It's just a much better trailer as a whole. I think them including Foxy, Bellamy, and Cavendish's bounty posters by the end there is a way of them letting us know that the show will have more Easter eggs for those of us who are already caught up. From what I've seen, I think my favorite set piece is the one for Roger's execution, and outside of some of the main cast, I think that Garp looks the most like his character in the manga. They also included Dragon in the public there, wearing his green hoodie/robe, and even though they're not visible, you can definitely feel the presence of the harnesses being used in some of those Zoro and Sanji action shots. Oda also released a statement to go along with the trailer's release, and there's some sections in that statement that make it obvious that he paid a lot of attention to the fandom's reaction to the first One Piece live-action trailer.
And so he says, even after the shoot was over, there were numerous scenes, the production agreed to reshoot because I felt they weren't good enough to be put out into the world. On the other hand, there were also some lines that I thought didn't feel like Luffy on paper. But when I saw the filmed scenes, I went, it works when it's Iñaki performing it as Luffy. This is what we were talking about with the first trailer, about how there was a sense of self-awareness that the live-action version of Luffy was showcasing in the trailer that didn't really go along or fit the character from the manga. So I'm glad that he's acknowledging that, because it's not just, it's like just, oh, people just want to hate. No. There's a difference. Like he's saying, there is a difference, but I'm letting you know that once you see the performance, it'll land differently. And again, I think the reason for why that sense of self-awareness is there is because it opens up the door to do some Marvel humor jokes. And so in this trailer, it's not as noticeable as it was in the first, but we do have that whole mutiny line with the seagull that would fall under the same umbrella.
Additionally, because of One Piece Day taking place in Japan this weekend, we also got a sneak peek at the Gear 5/Nika reveal in the anime, and I think it's pretty clear that the promo features the sound of the drums of liberation, and so as a promo, I think it does a really good job at getting people excited. But I guess we'll just have to wait till August 6th. Well, August 6th in Japan, but I'm sure it'll come out August 5th at night on Saturday if you're in the West.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of what the Gear 5/Nika reveal did for the story in Wano, because I think it ended up removing a lot of the tension from the climax of an arc that was already struggling to maintain tension in the first place. And even now, I think that fans really struggle with defining what the limitations of the mode are. Where's the ceiling? How godly is this god fruit? How cartoony can things actually get? I think there's a lot of people out there that just want to feel excited and feel hyped. So if I were to ask those people, do you understand the limitations? Do you understand the specifics of the mode? They would probably say, well, no, not really, but we want to feel excited and hyped. So we just kind of go along with it. That being said, because the mode is in its nature super cartoony and wild, and it literally feels like a Looney Tunes character jumped into One Piece to begin fighting Kaido, I strongly suspect that seeing it animated will make it land differently. In fact, in that little clip, it's already landing differently because you see like the fluidity of it and just being able to hear those drums beating. Like the rhythm is great, the beat is great, and it's something that is just, to me at least, it just feels like something that's unlike One Piece. But I think that's kind of the point in a way, because we're going back to pre-Void Century times with Joy Boy. This is sort of like an echo of an era that was erased, right? So maybe that's why it feels so foreign. So if I'm already beginning to get some new insight, just based on that promo alone, I can't wait to watch the full episode and see what surprises it hits me with. I'm 100% sure that it'll be a totally different experience than the one I had when I was reading the manga. Also, we're due to get a new opening and ending soon. That's right, I said ending for the One Piece anime. It's crazy, it's been so long. I'll put it into perspective, right? The last time the anime had an ending, I was not a fan of One Piece because I didn't know anything about the show back then. Like, I didn't read the manga, I didn't watch the anime, nothing. I literally do not know what it's like to have a One Piece episode, like in real time with an ending. Pretty sure that's a lot of us though. Now, one of the great things about having an opening and ending per episode is that you probably noticed, especially in the Wano openings, that in the middle of the opening, there's kind of like not a recap section, but sort of like a preview section of stuff that we will be seeing in the episode. And that's really just there to take up time, to make the opening longer. So with an ending, an actual ending, you don't need those previews anymore because the opening can be shorter. So it'll be like more fluid animation, right? Instead of that interruption happening in the middle.
All right, now we can go back to talking about Sword and Marines. According to Garp, after he throws something at Koby's head, the purpose of the Marines is to safeguard the future. And Oda decided to include Groose in the background there, sort of hearing the same lecture. And so that kind of allows Oda to say, Groose has been there all this time, But anyway, going back to Koby, just the notion that both Garp and Shanks are able to identify this huge amount of potential in him, to me that strongly suggests that Koby is not just the future of the Marines, but that he will also help shape the future of the entire world. In fact, said change has already started, and we could trace it back to Marineford when Shanks says that the moment Koby created by risking his life has already begun to alter the future of the world. And then later we also see Drake saying that the Marines will be forced to change after the war, which foreshadows the creation of Sword, which will undoubtedly end up becoming the dominating faction of the Marines by the end of the series, or at the very least it'll end up being the faction that ends up rebelling against the world government's orders. Now, something pretty big that we find out is that Garp's faith in Koby as a combatant is not unfounded, because there is a brief flashback where we see that Garp learns from Helmeppo that Koby actually trains himself 200 times harder than average to be able to compensate for his lack of natural aptitude. So he's kind of like a Rock Lee character. But there's also something about him pushing himself to the limit via his workout regimen that also reminds me a lot of Zoro. And I think this is as good a time as any to bring in two things that Rayleigh said about Haki. The first is that it lies dormant within everyone. It's just that some people never really make use of it because they never discover it. And the second thing is that Haki blooms in the heat of battle, which kind of echoes what Garp says to his apprentices when he tells them to never second guess themselves in the heat of the moment. That stated, I think that we all know at this point that Haki is an intentionally vague power system that is left vague on purpose so that Oda can add in plugins and add-ons whenever he feels like it. And so that's good for him because it gives him that flexibility. But recently, we've had examples of fans being very confused because of some of the lines not being clearly defined. Specifically when it comes to very strong armament versus advanced conquerors Haki. Now, I already explained what I think happened between the Garp and Kuzan Haki clash in my last video, but this time around I also saw some confusion regarding the type of Haki that Koby used to destroy Pizarro's arm. But long story short, when it comes to honesty impact, I do think that he's just using advanced armament. And there are several reasons that support this. Number one is that the trails of black lightning that Koby emits are nowhere near as big and thick as the lines that we've seen from Advanced Conquerors users in their attacks. We also learned that Koby trained himself the same way that Garp trained Kuzan, which by the way, that type of training reminds me a lot of Luffy's armament Haki training in Udon, which by the way, in the non-canon episode of Luffy, there is a scene very similar to what happens in this chapter, where Koby destroys a giant metal structure using a punch that is very similar to the type of punch that Luffy uses at the end of Wano Act 2, right before Onigashima when he destroys a tree. But the reason why I think that that little flashback with punching the ships has to be foreshadowing the use of advanced armament instead of advanced conquerors is because you cannot train conquerors. This is a key thing that Rayleigh tells Luffy. You cannot train Conqueror's Haki directly. You can train your observation, as we know, and you can train armament, but there is no way of being able to train Conqueror's Haki by itself. And the reason for that is because Conqueror's Haki is the embodiment of the user's will. So the only way to get stronger Conqueror's Haki is for the user to get stronger as a whole. So if the Conqueror's Haki user grows stronger in general, then the COC ends up growing along with that as a consequence. But unlike with observation and armament, there's no such thing as direct King's Haki training. Like, you can't spend time polishing it or getting specific about it. It's just a byproduct of you getting stronger. So that's why I think that the mention of Koby's training is foreshadowing advanced armament. Also, if you look at the way that he destroys the arm, the way that the blast gets emitted in a direct line really reminds me of the way that Rayleigh exemplified advanced armament Haki to Luffy right at the end of the pre-time skip with the elephant. Now, all this Marine talk brings with it the existence of a man that has become a meme and has puzzled One Piece fans for about a week and a half. And that man's name is Bogard. And his character design is actually inspired by Humphrey Bogart's look in one of my favorite movies of all time, Casablanca. Now, in case you don't know the tale of Bogart the Irrelevant, he was actually introduced in the Coby and Haki cover story, and he was actually being depicted there as Garp's right-hand man.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
He also makes an appearance during Garp's visit to Luffy in Water 7. But anyway, in the cover story, Bogart shows up along with Garp to take Axe-Hand Morgan into custody. Unfortunately, at that time, Garp reveals that he's been trying to beat a donut-eating record, so he hasn't been able to sleep for the past 5 days. And so Axe-Hand Morgan violently wounds Garp and takes Helmeppo hostage so that he can escape. Now, I don't know about you guys, but despite the fact that I like Garp as a character, and despite the fact that Garp does mention that he was asleep when Axe-Hand Morgan attacked him, that scene still makes me want to pick up the phone and dial the fraud prevention department. Especially because Axe-Hand just gets away, with no consequences. Like after Helmeppo pledges that his goal is to be able to surpass his father one day, Morgan just floats away in a little boat. Now, before that actually happened, Bogart was actually aiming a cannon towards Axe-Hand Morgan in Helmeppo's direction, but then Koby stands in front of it holding some pistols, which were actually censored in the anime. And so in the manga, Bogart actually slices up the pistols with his katana, confirming that the reason for why he's been irrelevant in the series since then is because Oda wants us to forget about him so that we will be utterly shocked when Bogart is revealed to be Zoro's final Marine opponent. Either that or he just created too many characters and he just doesn't care about him anymore.
And some fans have been claiming that Bogart actually made an appearance in the previous chapter, 1087. Apparently he's the guy that we see on the right, aboard Garp's ship, in the final double-page spread of the chapter. Speaking of cameos, something that I hadn't noticed before was that Kujaku actually makes an appearance during the Capone cover story. And then in this chapter, we see Panda Man right underneath Vasco Shot's jug in the final double-page spread.
Garp's speed gets highlighted in the chapter. He completely bypasses Aokiji, who may or may not be holding back, and then he zigzags all the way up to land a massive blow on the island's face. And this reveals a massive weakness to Pizarro's Devil Fruit power, which is that damage gets transferred from the parts of the island that he's manipulating over to his original body. So it's similar to Robin's weakness, where if you damage the extensions of her body, you actually harm her as well. That weakness really sucks for Pizarro, though. It's a pretty glaring weakness because it makes him a much bigger target. Like, you don't even have to go through the trouble of finding him like Zoro did with Pika. So I really hope that in the future we get some way of counterbalancing that weakness because it's pretty bad. And I have hope because in Dressrosa, you know how everybody was clowning Burgess because he got folded very easily by Sabo? But now he has the strong fruit, which kind of makes him look a little bit better. I'm kind of looking for something similar to help Pizarro compensate. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning here is that in the very beginning of the story, Koby kept saying that his dream, his goal was to become a Marine officer. But then later on in the story, he actually says that he wants to become an admiral. So that kind of makes me wonder if admiral level Koby is going to be peak Koby, or if he's actually going to end up going further than that and we'll get a shot of him being fleet admiral in the distant future. And so with Koby's potential in mind, now I can talk about the top tier level power that will shape the world and that I'm 100% sure that Koby will be able to use to help the Marines in the final battle / EOS. And that is the ability to hear the voice of all things. Now, we already know that the voice of all things is an incredibly mysterious and rare power that allows the user to communicate with not just living things, but also objects in the One Piece world. It's pretty similar to telepathy, but it also allows the user the ability to understand things at their core. Now, as of right now, these are the only confirmed characters being capable of tapping into that ability, but I'm pretty sure that Koby will be added to the list in the future. And there are several reasons for this. The first one is that we saw what happened in Marineford, where Koby's emotions were significantly affected by the loss of life around him. And the way that Oda depicted this was very similar to the way he showed Luffy and Momonosuke being able to use the voice of all things to understand Sunisha in Zou. Because initially it seems that the voice is so strong that it causes the user to feel uncomfortable enough to put their hands over their ears. Now we could also make the argument that the voice of all things is an ability that falls under the umbrella of observation haki, and if that's the case, that would also fit Koby perfectly, because Helmeppo says that Koby's observation haki is on another level. Like, it is insane how good his observation haki is sometimes. And this kind of takes us back to a little bit earlier when I said that some of the boundaries, some of the lines when it comes to haki can get a little bit blurry. And even somebody like Luffy, who is capable enough to be able to use future sight, even he admitted as recently as Wano that there are still things about the color of observation that he doesn't fully understand. We could also take this back to Zoro's fight in Alabasta, when after being pushed to the limit, he notices that he can sense the rhythm / the breath of inanimate objects around him. Like, he can sense rocks and even the earth, even the soil itself. And again, the fact that Zoro and Koby don't have any devil fruit powers, and the fact that they push themselves above and beyond in their physical training, is another noteworthy similarity. Furthermore, if you look at the list of characters that are currently confirmed to be able to use the voice of all things, a common trait they share is that most of them hold leadership positions within the story. So if Koby is meant to lead the Marines in the future, if he really is the future of the Marines, as Garp says, then him having the ability to hear the voice of all things will be indispensable, especially because, as we saw in Wano, the voice of all things would allow Koby to connect with Luffy to coordinate the mobilization of Marines and pirates alike at a global scale to be able to issue the new dawn of the world. One of the main themes of the story is to be able to bring about meaningful and positive change by bringing people together and connecting them. So in the endgame, just Luffy and Momonosuke having the voice of all things won't be enough to achieve some type of world peace. There also needs to be a character on the Marine side that is capable of using the ability properly to be able to maintain some sense of order and unity. And I think that responsibility will one day fall on Koby's shoulders. And I hope that by then Kuzan unfreezes Garp, so that at least Garp can get a glimpse of the achievements of his former pupils. It'd also be kind of cool to see if Bogard ends up becoming Koby's bodyguard or something. I noticed that by the end there, Hibari's really feeling Koby now. Like, she literally jumps on him to give him a hug. So I can't wait to see Akainu's reaction, because he's already shown that he wants to kill him anyway. Finally, Oda said that if Koby were an animal, he would be a dolphin. And one of the things we know is that dolphins can be pretty emotionally intelligent and have high levels of empathy. And they also have a history of saving people out at sea, like saving people from sharks and from drowning. And the flip side of that is that they can also be trained for combat.
Another thing I've read is that scientists have been trying to understand how dolphins communicate for a very long time. And even though we already know some stuff, like we know that they use whistles and click sounds, and they also use echolocation, overall their language is so complex that there's still some things that we just don't understand yet. And so that reminds me of that scene with Roger and Odin using the voice of all things on their way to Fishman Island to listen to the Sea Kings talking about how the whales will be happy in the future when the two rulers reunite. Things will actually work out this time around. It'll be different this time. So it really gets me to reflect on how dolphins have been around for millions of years, and yet we still don't know all there is to know about them. And specifically about their language, about how they communicate. Kind of reminds me of what Vegapunk says about how the technology that the ancient kingdom used, even though it seems super advanced and you can think that it could be from the future, it's actually from the past. It's just that we don't understand it yet. Also, there's something about Oda and the color pink and having crybaby characters, or characters that start out as crybabies, that turn out to be very important. Because we have Shidahoshi, pink hair, crybaby, ends up being an ancient weapon. Momonosuke, pink theme, pink dragon, Shogun of Wano. And then Koby, pink hair, he's going to be the future of the Marines, and he's going to issue in the new dawn along with Luffy on the Navy side. So yeah, I'm really wondering if the color pink is representative of something. Like, was there like a pink family or a pink clan pre-Void Century that ended up inheriting their will? I like this bit of information that we get by the end of the chapter that says, the incident in which Straw Hat Luffy, Emperor of the Sea, barricaded himself within Future Island Egghead. So I just watched Oppenheimer and I'm like, okay, so is this the beginning of the event that will change the world forever? Is this going to be like some kind of a fortress fight, like a strategic stronghold situation against Kizaru? Will Luffy end up claiming Egghead as his territory by the end of it? I appreciate the way that Oda's handling the build-up towards this big event. It's like a countdown to something, you know? So it just kind of makes it more exciting. Thank you for watching, guys, and for all of your support on my videos. If you would like to, you can follow me on Instagram at Team7Mage. That is going to do it for me. Let me know what you thought about the points that I raised in the video down below. I hope you found some of those points to be thought-provoking. Take care, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.